The battery is docked along the southern coast of the Undersea, her hull moored against the weathered stones of Adam's Way, a port built upon monumental ruins that speak of a forgotten age. As I step ashore, the weight of centuries presses down upon me, the whispers of bygone civilizations echoing through the crumbling stone. The grandeur of the ruins that surround us is awe-inspiring, a testament to the achievements of those who came before, now lost to the sands of time. Yet amidst the faded glory and crumbling stone, there is a sense of unease that hangs in the air, a reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows. Our supplies and fuel are dwindling, one of the many harsh realities of life in the undersea. The search for polythrene and the carnate grows ever more desperate with each passing day, our quest ever overshadowed by the spectre of hunger and deprivation. And yet, we will not be so easily snuffed out, not yet. As we scour the ruins of Adam's Way for provisions and respite, I am reminded of the resilience that each of us holds, an indomitable human spirit that drives us ever onwards. With the promise of polythrene beckoning from beyond the horizon, I steel myself to the challenges that lay ahead. For we are sailors of the undersea, and our story does not yet end here. On a bed of monumental ruins, warehouses and way stations of shroom timber rise. All ships that approach Adam's Way are intercepted by the gracious, the Presbyterians, splendidly head-dressed coast guards. A quaint but inviolable tradition governs entry. We must tell them one of 3 stories. In return, we will be permitted to spend a single day in the port, and yet we have no tales they desire. I asked why us foreigners were only allowed to spend a single day in Adam's Way. For your own protection, one of them explained kindly. Unsafe. The soil of the elder continent is dangerous to incomers, they claim. Those who linger can contract unfortunate conditions, hysteria, rapture, amnescience, and the rumors that Presbyterian law offers no protection to foreigners after dark. Apparent nonsense, and while we were not permitted to leave the dock, not without a good story, there were still supplies that could be gained. Palagast's Post. The sign at the door read "Licensed for Mortal Trade." Here they sold both fuel and supplies, among other treasures. Selling off the bale of parabola linen, I decided to purchase enough fuel to take us to 10 units, and enough supplies to take us to 10. In addition, an aroma caught my nose. A sack full of dark dropped coffee, all the fire of hell and all the aroma of heaven. 5 units would do for now. Perhaps we could find somewhere to sell them on yet. Pulling out our charts, I plotted our next path. Much of what lay in this section of the sea was a mystery to us. Perhaps a journey directly north would see us to the elusive polythrene. A captain can only hope, and while I desired to leave our light extinguished, to conserve fuel, the slow-growing terror in the crew would not allow us the precaution. Thankfully, our journey into the dark was not long before a sighting of land came. Rising out of the dark, one could spy a scatter of yellow-lit honey dens and brightly painted alehouses. To the southeast of the isle rose the stone tower of Cavendish Abbey. Its ramparts hung with crimson and gold banners. There are sailors from all across the Neath, hauling cargo, dicing and rolling good-naturedly on the docks. The air carries the sound of sea shanties sung with more enthusiasm than skill, and the smell of roses edged with brimstone. This was the Isle of Cats and Port Cavendish. After mooring the battery, I began to compile the report. Though the Isle seems at present beyond the reach of the Admiralty's laws, that does not mean that the Admiralty lacks interest in their activities. Roses and kings. I spent half a day observing the docks and noting an astonishing number of variety in the ships visiting. Was that a Carnate trimaran? Nestled beside a vessel from the Iron Republic. The dockhands complain loudly that they've never been busier. The catties talk ceaselessly and carelessly about smuggling and piracy. But even the most hardened sailors lower their voices when they mention the king. They go even quieter when they talk about the Rose Garden. I make careful notes. Perhaps the Admiralty will understand what they mean, even if I don't. After compiling the report, I was greeted by a wide-eyed dockmaster. "Welcome to the Isle of Cats," she said, greeting me brightly. "Would you like to bribe me not to write down your details in this nice official ledger?" For 5 echoes, it seemed little cost. I handed over the coins, and she tipped me a sharp smile before waving to the nearest alehouse. The entire process is straightforwardly corrupt and pleasingly efficient. The alehouse sign is a tiger painted the color of rose petals. Someone has gone through great trouble and expense to gild the creature's eyes. They look out over the port, feral and unseeing. A caged hive of lamplighter bees hangs from the ceiling like a chandelier. A few sailors give me hard-mouthed, assessing looks, but most ignored my presence. I could not help but take note. The catties all wore a pair of amber stones threaded around their necks or pinned to their collars. "Cat's eyes," one of them said, "for the Pirate King." As far as I can gather, the Pirate King's name is Leopold, and he controls all the trade on the island. Half of the catties believe that he can take the form of a crimson tiger and creep into their dreams. The other half suspect, more prosaically, that he simply eats those who displease him. I next caught a whispered conversation and the clink of coins, an exchange of goods. I turned my head as though I was admiring one of the mouldering draperies hung from the wall. A vial flashed in the buyer's trembling hands. He uncorked it, pouring a few drops of thick red liquid down his throat. The vial dropped to the floor, and when I looked back up, he was gone. I blinked, looking around. Nobody else seemed in the least bit perturbed that a man disappeared from their midst. I picked up the fallen vial and examined the traces left inside. Sticky honey, gleaming with the redness entirely unlike blood. And then, what was that? A crimson-veiled nun. But what sort of nun would be in a place like this?
"A mellifluous sister, of course,"
she responded, performing a complicated negotiation between veil, thick glove, and a glass of mushroom wine. I asked what one of those is, and she snorted.
"I'm glaring at you underneath this blooming veil."
I acted appropriately cowed, and the mellifluous sister thawed a little.
"We are beekeepers and honey harvesters. The catties owe their prosperity to us, and the Pirate King too."
She slurped the last of the mushroom wine behind her veil, and then the barkeep glided over to refill her glass, eyes respectfully downcast. I felt like I had learnt all I could from the Rose and Tiger. There must be more to the Isle of Cats than drunken sots and Z-stories. However, the barkeep stopped me before I reached the door and handed me a brooch set with 2 amber stones. He waited impassively until I pinned it to my clothes.
"Everybody wears the cat's eyes here,"
he told me, moving aside to let me pass.
"Just a friendly reminder that the Pirate King is watching."
It seems that no place, then, is truly lawless. Our next stop was the Honey Tongue. It is both a brothel and a honey den, run by someone the catties refer to as the King's Claw. Entering the brothel is like sliding into the dream of a surface orientalist. Jewel-embroidered cushions, bright silk drapes, gilded statues of elephants, sun-bearers, and clouded leopards, silver censers releasing curling plumes of rose-scented smoke into the air. The courtesans are red-lipped and cold-smudged. When I caught their eye, they smiled back with a professional interest. I sought to ask exactly what red honey is. I knew, of course, only the particulars had slipped my mind. One of the nearby courtesan's eyebrows lifted infinitesimally, but his reply is practice. When lamplighter bees suck the nectar of the crimson stain of exile's rose, they are driven to madness. They enter the brain of humans and harvest their memories. He shuddered, as though imagining the process himself. Those memories are instilled in the red honey. Each sip is a burst of memory on the tongue. Deliciously awful, isn't it? He uttered as he fluttered his dyed feather fan. Wanting to know more about the substance, I wandered towards Cavendish Abbey. The crimson-clad mellifluous sisters patrolled its ramparts and tended to their hives of lamplighter bees. The mellifluous sisters make their home in the richly appointed stone tower of Cavendish Abbey. Their thick gloves and crimson-meshed helmets are worn less for modesty and more for practicality. They tend the hives of the lamplighter bees all across the isle and make a religious observance of harvesting red honey for the Pirate King. There was an opening, a small one at that, to gain some knowledge, however it would cost. 5 fuel, in fact. Fuel for the bee smokers. Perhaps we could return to Adam's Way to purchase more. The sister who tends the smokers seems to be a rather talkative sort. She told me that the Pirate King went to Abbey Rock 50 years ago and asked the abbess to send some of her novices to Port Cavendish. I asked why, and she shook her head. The better question is, why did the abbess send her precious novices to a place like this? I suggested a hefty bribe or perhaps coercion. The sister cackled harshly. The Sisters of the Rock respect strength of arms, which of course the Pirate King knew only too well. He challenged the abbess to a duel and won. She didn't have much of a choice then. She cackled. Ask our abbess if you don't believe me. She was one of those very novices sent across the sea. Now, with more pieces of the puzzle unlocked, I returned to the honeyed tongue. There was a sea captain weeping gently into a courtesan's bosom, muttering of her lost crew in the rose gardens. "They're all tending the gardens now," she wailed and began to weep once more. "My poor crew!" I waited for a hitch in her sobs and inquired further. It is a slow, delicate business drawing answers out of her, but I am nothing if not perseverant. It seems her crew was conscripted by the Lady of the Gardens, and that their duties are something far worse than horticulture. I left her reciting the names of her lost sailors, and then commending them to Salt's mercy. For now, we could gain no more attention of the Pirate King. Perhaps in time we might. For now, though, we would journey back south, back to Adam's Way, in need of more fuel. However, on our journey, the crew was uneasy. Something out there was seeking us, and on the morn of January 18th, 1888, we saw it. A dreadnought out there on those bleak waters, trailing us at a distance. Their hostility was unknown, until a great cannon fired, releasing a volley, narrowly missing the battery. We pushed on, racing for the dock. Yet, with another explosion in the dark, the ship was rattled from the impact. But thankfully, no lives were lost, and at Adam's Way, we could find some safety for a time. We still had no way off of the dock, not without a good story, yet fuel was all I sought. Leaving Adam's Way, we would have to be cautious not to gain the attention of the dreadnought again. Yet, the Z was silent. No cannon fire, no flares. For now, we had safe passage northwards. The false stars above are feral amber, like tigers' eyes. This was the Stamford Expanse, named for one who lost his child to cats. The air trembles. A breath of change passes, screeching out of the dark. To the north, yet another isle was brought to our attention, our loyal Zebat, showing the way. It was difficult to make out under the false starlight. It seemed I could see a giant face staring towards those very same false stars. Yes, a place of legend. This was the port of Visage, where faces may not be naked, except one, that stone monument the size of a village church, serenely gazing upwards, flourishing of years. Before anything else, a report would be conducted. I can at least interview those who are leaving. A departing merchant gave me a confused account of crocodiles and honeycakes and something about air blockages. To this I add my own impressions about the street layout close to the port and the types of commerce here. When the lights are especially bright, it's possible to make out the details of the profile of that great stone face. Well, it was now or never. I set off, going ashore, inwards and upwards. All those who enter must play their parts. The sign is visible only after I crossed the threshold. On the lower slopes, stone buildings, flat roofs, archways. In the architecture, there lingers a memory of lotus and palm fronds. The hill above is a face, forever looking up at the ceiling of the Untersea. No one inhabits its cheeks or the hollows of its eyes. I sought to check in at the custom house. One may not wander Visage at will. There was a changing room. All visitors must pass, one by one, through a room guarded by a person in the mask of a moon moth. Masks in all assortment of shapes and colors awaited. I sought to ask the significance of these masks. Maybe there's more to it than a question of aesthetic taste. The moon moth explained, each mask declares a different intention towards the denizens of Visage and must be accompanied by suitable behavior. The frog is for visitors who, though perhaps clumsy and unfamiliar with local etiquette, have come in order to observe local ways and make uncouth comments about them. The locust is for those who seek profit in Visage and would carry away as many goods as possible. I prompted about the bat. Moon moth hesitated. Bat is an ill-omened visitor, sent as a messenger or a spy. Bat always dies. While the bat mask looked enticing, I instead chose the locust mask for now. It was voracious, and I sought to come out of this with something, a hunger for all things. Moon moth settled the locust mask over my head. The eye holes were covered with a thin gold film through which valuable objects gleamed more brightly. May you find a happy harvest, said Moon moth. Then, when I have partly turned away, it double-knotted the ties on its purse, as though I was likely to pick its pockets. Doesn't it know I can see? I first sought to visit the Library of Parts, so called because all the books are fragmentary, perhaps. Stooping at the lintel, I entered the dark. It was a room of heavy stone, guarded by a golden statue of a woman with outstretched arms. The scroll niches sorted to correspond to a variety of masks, the jackal and the lioness, the crocodile and the dung beetle. A woman in the mask of a lotus blossom was standing at a lectern, reading in silence. Moon moth stood to one side as my escort and tour guide. I asked about the purpose of the room. What sort of parts are they anyway? Moonmoth explained. People think it means something like Library of Fragments, but this is wrong. The parts in question are like the parts in a play. This is where the denizens of Visage come in order to learn how to perform their masks more accurately, more completely, with a truer spirit. And well, I sought to play my part. The other readers seem preoccupied. While they are looking, I sought to be acquiring. There was a chance I could be caught, yet the risk was low. I dipped my fingers into a crocodile's purse and acquired a few coppers from a heron. The coins here are no more than tiny copper chips, each stamped with an eye sigil. The exchange rate must be thousands of these to the echo, hardly worth taking home. But I have acted as the locust is meant to act anyhow. There are no scrolls for locusts in the Library of Parts, but now I know, if not the whole picture, at least a fragment. Next came the flooded court. The Moonmoth spoke as though I should already know what it is. High water. The flood court is a long stone room with 2 ranks of columns on either side. Currently, the court is in ankle-deep water, though water stains on the stone shows that the flood has often reached higher, sometimes up to the height of one's waist. In a raised niche at the end of the room sits a statue of a man with a head of a ram. He holds a jar from which water flows out onto the floor. Standing to the side, the Moonmoth awaited, and I sought to ask the purpose of this place. It doesn't really look as though it's good for anything at all. From a corner, Moonmoth picked up a graduated stick. He showed me how a person standing at the end of the room may dip the stick into the water and use it to measure the water level at pre-selected points, and how the measurements are compared with measurements written on a calendar. If the water level does not match the calendrical position, an assembly of pipes and drains is used to adjust it. It used to be, says the moth, that the water rose and fell of its own accord, and the people before wrote down what height it reached. Now the water is still, but thanks to their actions, we can replicate the rise and fall, so as still to be pleasing to the god of the flood. It completes this examination with a half-body bow towards the statue of the ram deity. Yet again, I had an opportunity to play my part, gathering coin from the flood court floor. Apparently, people use it as a wishing well. It was a chancy challenge. However, I would be the locust I was meant to be. As I waded into the water and began gathering coins, people watched me from behind their masks. Moonmoth looked uncertain. I'm playing the role of locust flawlessly, but these are sacred. I hesitate for a moment, my will wavering, and that's enough. The others rushed to me and drove me out, but I am not made to leave the city, at any rate. As we left, the Moonmoth seemed to be making subtle overtures for some time, and now I thought I might understand them. The moth sought to trade masks. It drew me aside into a closet in the customs house. I had enough of Visage, it told me frankly. Here, take my mask and pretend to be me. I'll trade in the visitor's mask and get on some departing ship, get my life back, drop this whole act. Its face, no, now I see it. Her face is aging but unaligned. A lifetime of never needing to use a facial expression. With my new mask in place, I sought to visit the house of the chief geometer. It is understood to be an honor. Lines in wet ground. Each morning, the man in the cobra mask draws lines in the mudflat with a pointed steel rod. This apportions to each inhabitant a small trapezoidal area from which to harvest mushrooms and to scrape salt. No plot is ever preserved from one day to the next. This man is the chief geometer, the keeper of directions, master of land measures and sea measures. Now that I've been invited to his home, at the time customarily appointed for him to receive those who are not his equal in rank, yet not so far beneath him as to deserve to be ignored, what ceremonial gift should I bring? A string of rats, a necklet of lapis beads, a poem concerning snakes copied on a new scroll, a comb made of bone, fresh candles. In the end, I decided upon the lapis beads. If they do not suit him, they may suit a wife of his. If they don't suit her, he can use them for an offering. Feeling blue, he gave them to a servant with orders that they be crushed and the powder made into a pigment and the pigment used for painting. It is uncertain whether this is a deadly insult. I was not thrown out of the house at any rate. And from there came the temple of Apis. All the denizens of Visage go there sooner or later. The wounded god. In the center of the temple is a black bull with a white diamond on its face. It is tied in place with heavy ropes, and it is wounded in the thigh. From this wound it bleeds copiously without dying. The priests gather around the bull, capturing its blood in cups. I could attempt to bandage the bull, offer to sell them a new, undamaged bull, collect some of the blood for myself, leave a respectful token, or observe and make notes. The customs here may be worth reporting later. It seemed the safest bet for now. The priests would be suspicious of anyone else who did this, but I, as Moonmoth, often have a need to narrate the rituals of Visage to newcomers. The explanations in the Library of Parts are not suitable for strangers, and therefore I am expected to compose my own. Finally came the side of the face. The stone cheek of flourishing of years is visited as a pilgrimage by the inhabitants of Visage, and I am in good favor. I may too go yet. I must, of course, wait until my work is done with this day's crop of frogs and locusts. It would not be suitable for them to come along. Up on the hillside, the buildings become scarcer and then vanish entirely, leaving me looking at the bottom of a great chin. I noticed a frog that had wound its way up here and sought to offer it instructions. It's the sort of thing my moth would have done. It was a modest challenge. I told the frog a partially true story about how this face was carved. The frog replied with an amplified belch and a story it heard about the sphinxes known as the salt lions. It really was a very good frog. I then sought to enter the hollow of the ear. It is a place of still greater pageantry, a proud nose. It has been a festival day. The great stone has been illuminated from forehead to chin with blazing torches so that the profile is visible from the side more clearly than I have ever seen it. Flourishing of years is awake, says the gentlest figure in the crocodile mask. All denizens of Visage are walking towards the air together. There is a place in the procession which belongs by right to the wearer of my mask. I fell in line with the others. How else would I discover what lay within? I go as though I were truly one of them. I carry nothing with me but my mask and costume.
May your heart be light as a feather,
said the woman in the lotus blossom mask as I fell into line behind her. The road I followed led up through switchbacks, along the side of the face, and finally to the ear of flourishing of years, and into the cave that is her ear. The tunnel bended back on itself, and all lights had now been extinguished. There is nothing to guide me but the hand of the person on my back, and the movement of the person in front of me. The one who walks beside me wears a bat mask. Fortunately, the floor of the tunnel is very smooth and presents no stumbling blocks. Sound carries strangely in this place, however. Sometimes I cannot hear my own footsteps, and sometimes a breath comes back to me, as audible from some place ahead in line. I would continue. There was a secret in the dark, and I would seek it. The footsteps of the people are steady and synchronized as we go together. For how many years has this been done? And for how many more will it be done in the future? "Watch your step here," said Batmask to me in an undervoice. Its accent is that of the Wolfstack docks. Floor is about to get squishier. And sure enough, it does. As the last tunnel opens, I and all other congregates spread out in a cavernous space. A voice speaks in the darkness, a ritual preparation.
Here, at the new year, we gather under the one mask of flourishing of years. Her face is turned to the gods. Protected by her mask, we may remove our own. Protected by her script, we may speak outside our parts.
Here and there is the sound of people fumbling with ties and strings. My own face felt different with the mask off. I would wait and listen. Perhaps there were things that I could learn to my advantage. I moved stealthily through the dark, hearing one knot of the conversation and then another. The secrets exchanged do not offer much leverage, and I can't see the owners of those secrets. Here and there I caught the smallest fragment of something that might serve me on a future occasion. The memory of a voyage east, a half-rumor of the Carnelian coast, a muttering about the Admiralty. Yet they were fragments I could use, however. There was nothing else to do, except let the ceremony end according to the proper rites. At the end of the hour, there came a woman with a feather of shimmering silver, which she stuck into my hand, symbol of the innocent heart that will not be eaten by the jackal. Then a bell rang, and the time of speech was over. We all began to put back on our masks. It is possible, you cannot know for sure, that in this cover someone has exchanged a mask with someone else. It is an orderly and perfect line that emerges again from the ear of flourishing of years. If anyone watches from above, they must surely be satisfied. I left with a captivating treasure and a secret that no doubt the crew would love to learn. It was time now to end my performance and leave the island. I could not stay in character forever. When the other citizens were distracted, I found my way to the customs house and rid myself of the mask and robe. There was satisfaction in laying aside a role well performed.